as the Dharmata Buddha shines instantly with the light of the Nishayanda Buddha and the Nirmala Buddha. So does the inner realization of the ultimate truth shine forth all at once, superseding the wrong views based upon ideas of being and not being. The will body. No definite statement of the triple body dogma is found in the Lankavatara, but all the component ideas seem to be present, as is recognizable here. Dharmata Buddha, Nishayanda Buddha, and Nirmana Buddha, which apparently correspond to the later trinity of Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya. It would be interesting to discuss here the development of the dogma if the author were not going to restrict himself in this chapter to such topics in the Lankavatara as are more or less directly connected with the absolute idealism developed in the sutra and with the intuitive knowledge of the truth which is its principal theme, these being the foundation of Zen Buddhism. He wishes, however, to touch upon the idea of Nirmana Buddha as it is closely related to that of Pranidhana, the Bodhisattva's vow. Being thoroughly idealistic. Whatever is most vehemently desired by the Buddha or Bodhisattva, whose interest extends over the whole field of beings, must take effect in one way or another in this world, even of our ordinary life. To have, however, a wish realized successfully, one may have frequently to exceed the limitations of this physical body, which is tied to space-time relations. A body not so limited will be needed in this case, a body that can be manifested anywhere and at any time as is wished. The Buddha of Bodhisattva has this body known as Manomayakaya, which means mind-made body, or simply will body. The definition of Manomayakaya according to the Lankavatara, is this. By Manomaya, as willed, is meant the power to move about as speedily and unobstructed as is willed. Like the mind that moves unobstructed over mountains, walls, rivers, trees, and other objects, even beyond many hundreds of thousands of yojanas. By merely thinking of objects seen and perceived previously, with its own thought continuously and uninterruptedly working regardless of the limitations of the body. So when the Manomayakaya is obtained in the realization of the samadhi known as Mayapama Maya-like, one acquires the 10 powers, the tenfold self-mastery, and the 6 psychic faculties, is adorned with the distinguishing marks, and born in the family of Holy Path, and, thinking of the objects of his original vow, which is to bring all beings to full maturity, moves about among them as unobstructed as the mind moves on. The 3 kinds of Manomayakaya are distinguished in the Lankavatara, somewhat foreshadowing the later systematization of the triple body dogma. The 3 are the will body attainable in the bliss of samadhi, the will body born of the knowledge of the self-nature of the Dharma, and the will body whose deeds are not calculative, being born among the order of the holy ones. The first kind is the product of a perfect mental control which takes place as the Bodhisattva ascends through the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th stage of spiritual discipline, and realizes that the mind in its true nature is above its evolved vijnanas, and, seeing into the phenomenality of objects, is tranquil like the ocean undisturbed by waves. The second form comes from a deep penetration into the truth of all things, which is enjoyed by the Bodhisattva above the 8th stage. For as he perceives that all things are mere appearances like Maya, and non-entities, there takes place a revulsion in the recess of his consciousness, and he enters into the samadhi called Mayapama and then into other samadhis. He is now adorned with flowers, with various attributes such as the tenfold self-mastery and the 6 psychic faculties, etc. Moves as quickly as thought itself. And the body attained now is like the lunar reflection in water, or an image in a mirror, or a vision in a dream. It is not made of the 4 elements and yet resembles one so made. It is furnished with all the parts of the material body. He will now enter into all the Buddha lands, their circles and assemblies. As he has thus perfectly penetrated into the nature of the Dharma, he has the second form of the will body. The third will body comes from deeply experiencing the bliss of the inner realization enjoyed by all the Buddhas. Of the 3 kinds of Manomayakaya, the second is the most important, and when the body is mentioned without qualifications, it generally means this, as we have for instance on pp. 125 to 126 and pp. 80 to 81. We quote the statement on pages 80 to 81. How does a Bodhisattva Mahasattva keep himself above the view that upholds the reality of birth, abiding, and disappearance? Let him regard all things as dreams or Maya-created forms. They never have been born because self, others, and all of them are non-existent. When things are viewed in conformity with the doctrine of mind, only, when external objects are seen as having no real existence, the Vijnanas do not revolve. When the idea of causal accumulation is done away with, the triple world is seen originating from wrong discrimination. When thus all things, external and internal, are viewed as having no self-substance and unattainable i.e. unreal, a Bodhisattva can keep himself away from the idea of birth. He will acquire what is known as resignation to the idea that all things are unborn, as they have the self-nature of Maya, etc. Such bodhisattvas have now reached the 8th stage. They know the significance of citta, manas, and manovijnana, the 5 dharmas, the 3 svabhavas, the twofold niratma, and have realized a revulsion in their inner being, and because of this they now have the will body. Thus, O Mahamati, it is that the Bodhisattva Mahasattva keeps himself above the view that upholds the reality of birth, abiding, and disappearance. In this connection let me notice that the Lankavatara makes reference to 2 kinds of death which takes place in the life of a bodhisattva. The first is the natural death happening to his physical body, which is acquired as the result of his past karma committed through his evil passions and outflowings. In Chinese this death is called, meaning graded, because the end of life variously comes to individuals. The other is inconceivable transformation death. This happens to the subtle body of a bodhisattva which he assumes as the consequence of his karma and intellectual hindrance which has not yet been thoroughly destroyed. The life limit of this supermaterial body is indefinite as it depends upon the original vows of the bodhisattva. His compassionate heart makes him wish to live eternally among mortal beings in order to save the last one. He may live in this body until then. And again he may have it in any size he desires, and be able to perform wonderful deeds of all kinds, and also go through as many transformations as required. He achieves this spiritual existence when he enters upon the path of Bodhisattvahood. It will be quite an interesting study to inquire into the historical acts which prompted Buddhist scholars to conceive the idea of a spiritual body which could be acquired as the outcome of one's moral training. There is no doubt that the Manomayakaya is the forerunner of the Nirmana as one of the triple body, and that all these conceptions were needed by early Mahayanists to interpret the religious significance of the historical Sakyamuni side by side with the conception of Dharmakaya. The inner realization referred to in the 3rd Manomayakaya is the common property of all the Buddhas. And when a bodhisattva attains this insight into his inmost being, he has thereby attained the passport into the spiritual community of all the Buddhas, past, present and future. If a critic insists that this subjectivity ought to be verified objectively, i.e., must have some objective ground on which the experience is to be set up. The Lankavatara says that there is what is to be called paranastiti dharmata, something that has been in existence from the timeless past, or thingness that abides eternally in things, or an absolute reality that exists regardless of the appearance or non-appearance of the Buddhas. This reality exists in the world as gold exists concealed in the ore. For it is this that makes things abide, makes them arrange themselves in order and establish a realm among themselves, and constitutes their essence. It is eternally there. It is the suchness of things. Therefore, when the Bodhisattvas or Buddhas attain to realization, the experience is not something altogether new to them. It is an old story, as it were. It is like walking in an old city which one happens to discover in the midst of the desert. The streets are smoothly paved as ever. One enters into it, and quietly enjoys a peaceful life. The Buddha did not create these things, they have been there from the beginning. The Dharma he has an insight into is something enduring, a regulative principle, and suchness of things, it is reality, truth. And it was for this reason that the Buddha declared that ever since his enlightenment night he had not uttered a word. This is indeed, according to the Lankavatara, the esoteric teaching of Buddhism. The conception of paranastiti dharmata, or purva dharmastitita, is the doctrine of universal alayavijnana ontologically stated. The pratyatmagati consists in realizing this originally abiding Dharma, which is variously described as tathagatagava, the alaya, suchness of things. It is beyond the signs of speech, analysis, and description, and in it all the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and sentient beings are united, and have an ever-enduring community nirvana. But the function of the Bodhisattva is not to stay forever in this happy society, but to come into a world of particulars. His vows are to be fulfilled, and in this he is said truly to be a Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva and social life. The central theme of the Lankavatara has been explained as being the attainment of an insight into the inmost consciousness. And to attain this we have seen that the sutra approaches the subject in two ways, logical and psychological. But as Buddhism is a religion and as every religion has its practical and social side, without which it will lose its reason of existence, the Lankavatara also prepares the Bodhisattva for his mission as one of the members of a cooperative life. In fact, this is what distinguishes the Mahayana from the Hinayana. For the latter's object of spiritual discipline does not extend beyond his own interest, however exalted it may be in itself, the object being the attainment of arhatship, a solitary saintly life. This is all well as far as it goes, but as we are all living within a most complicatedly organized communal body, not accepting even a Buddha or a Bodhisattva, we have to think of this side of life.